Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, I am going to attempt to explore a question that has been posed to me as of late regarding whether we as collectors, we as a community, are too obsessed with 9.8s. Stay tuned. I'll be honest with you, I am having a tough time trying to understand one obsession from another obsession, trying to delineate the shades of gray that exist with our obsession with something. And I say that because we as collectors generally are obsessed about everything. This hobby is rooted in the idea of obsession. And so I have a hard time saying we're too obsessed about 9.8s versus all of the other things that we are obsessed about. If you think about it, we spend time every single year creating want lists in which we identify the books that we are going to focus on. Focus, another word for obsession. We create these want lists. We identify the books we're going to go after, and as we get those books, we post up our revised want list with big X's crossing out those books that we've actually taken down. We create videos about being out there on the hunt as if we are actual hunters hunting in the wild. We're out there looking for books. We are going through long boxes at cons and at LCSs. Why? Because we are obsessed with the hunt. Heck, I have created an entire video series on hunting for Hulk issue #1. That's how obsessed I was about that book. I spent months trying to track down a great copy after selling lots of comics to be able to buy it. So again, are we too obsessed about 9.8s? Not really, because how does that obsession compare with some of the others? Now, what I will tell you is that I think our fixation on 9.8s is actually rooted potentially in something that is important. And I am going to be curious as to what your thoughts are. So definitely leave those behind in the comment section. The first thing that I want to highlight is that if you think about it, comic book and collectible value comes from the convergence of supply and demand. It is where those two meet that you will actually see incredibly high prices and also values. For example, if you look at the census data that's out there, you're going to see that there are not a ton of copies of Action Comics issue #1 or the first appearance of Batman or the first appearance of a lot of Golden Age characters, for example. And it is that low supply coupled with high demand that realizes some crazy prices for those comics where people are paying thousands of dollars for just small portions of a comic from the Golden Age. It is the convergence of those two things that is driving prices high. And I think what is potentially happening is that people in the present are realizing that maybe there is a new standard as it relates to modern comics. When you think about the Golden Age and even the Silver Age for that matter, the standard is, do you have a copy? Right? We just want a copy of Fantastic Four 48 or 49. We just want a copy of, AF-15 or ASM-1. We just want a copy. It doesn't matter what the grade is. But when you think about modern comics, the math is a little off. And here's what I mean by that. Again, it's about the convergence of supply and demand. The limited supply, the limited number of copies of certain Golden Age comics that have survived to the present day has limited their supply. The demand is still there because people absolutely love some of these characters. They want these titles in their collection. But with modern comics, that math doesn't necessarily work out. Why? Because almost as soon as a book comes out, we are sending that book off to be graded. And so there's going to be supply. And it's not like we are printing tons of copies of these books. It's the simple fact that literally, as soon as a book is printed, we are sending it in to be graded. And so that limited supply won't necessarily be a factor for us in the future in the next 30, 40 years. So what will be a contributing factor to the supply and demand equation? It might be the new standard that I mentioned a second ago, the standard of the 9.8 and maybe even the 9.6. That becomes the new standard. Not do you have a copy? No, it's do you have a 9.8, because that becomes the floor potentially for the future, where the 9.8, the 9.9, and even the 10 becomes the thing, the part of the supply equation coupled with demand that drives the future value for these comics. And that's not to say that the lesser grades aren't important, but my point here is that there potentially is a realization on the part of people that the 9.8 for modern comics is the standard for the future. It is what will determine the value because of some of the things that I've already mentioned. Scarcity won't be an issue for these comics in the future, even if we are only printing 5,000, 10,000, 25,000 copies of a comic, because so many of them will be graded and thus protected and thus will survive into the future. So to my previous point, the new standard for modern comics might be the 9.8. And I am not sitting here saying that that is bad, that is right, that is wrong. I'm simply illustrating that that appears to be the standard that we are setting for ourselves. And so there is a reason why people will get upset if they send in a modern comic and it comes back at a 9.6 or lesser grade, because they realize, maybe inherently, maybe purposefully, that the 9.8 is the new threshold for the future. So I think that that's why you see people be disappointed anytime they do an unboxing and a book comes back not at a 9.8. That's why people absolutely want that, because they realize that it won't be limited supply that will drive value into the future. And if you think about it, we honestly celebrate the 9.8. There is a little bit of a status that comes with the 9.8. I'm literally sitting in front of a wall right now of 9.8s, right? And there is a reason for that, because again, I realize that the new standard is what is sitting behind me, not necessarily the 9.6 or the lesser grades. And that's part of the reason why I take a moment to acknowledge the fact that I have these books. And there isn't anything wrong with that in my mind. It is just a shift. And in many ways, it is also consistent with who we are as collectors. We want that hard to find item. We want that hard to get item. We want that challenge. And to some degree or another, the 9.8 is that new standard for us. Again, back in the day when it was Silver Age books, you just wanted any copy, any copy. That was the challenge, to just find one. Now things have shifted, where the thing to have, the thing to get, the thing to covet is the 9.8. So piggybacking on my previous point, there is definitely some status that comes along with the 9.8. There is definitely the whole challenge aspect of it. So it stands to reason that we as collectors are focused. We are fixated on the 9.8 because, again, we recognize that the standard has shifted. And I'm not certain whether this is right or wrong, whether it's good or bad, but I am definitely looking forward to reading your comments down in the comment section. So don't be shy about letting your opinions be heard, because after all, this is very much an opinion-based video. As always, if you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.